So, thank you, everybody. I feel like, we sort of connected in a community spirit, which is really collaborative, and that to me, that's woman's way. So, and another thing that I like to do is I always like to honor the indigenous people of the land where we are, where I happen to be giving a presentation. So I don't have any matches, but just like to just ask you to join me in honoring the Wasco and the Warm Springs and the Paiute people, who are the First Nations people of this land. The relatives of this region who support us being here to do this work. Thank you. And if you would like to say something, because it's lovely to have you here. So
I am so honored and grateful to be here. Thank you. And thank you for that.
Okay, so I know this is this is a difficult subject, as we know. And I want to just bring in Barb McEntee, who was the third editor on this book. She couldn't be here, but this book was her idea. And she is a woman vet, and she invited me to be a part of it, and then she invited you to be a part of it. So this is how this came about, this book. So, and I learned a lot from her, and I really appreciate her spirit, and told her that we would bring her spirit here. So, okay. So I would like to just ask, my topic really, I guess, I think I don't have this schedule. Okay.
No.
Well, my topic is patriarchy. So you've all heard of patriarchy, have you studied patriarchy? No. You probably know.
Yeah.
As do you. So to me, I feel like putting trauma in, and trauma that women experience in the military and outside the military, just everywhere really, needs to be put into a context. Otherwise, we're going along and we're working on healing ourselves, which is wonderful. It's a good thing to do. It's not always comfortable, but it's a good thing to do. But I've noticed that there just isn't a context for what has happened to women over the last 6,000 years. So when you really think about that, when you really think about trauma, and the trauma that gets reenacted in militaries, in just a number of institutions, patriarchal institutions, that if we don't talk about patriarchy and what it is, and how women are treated in patriarchy, and it's not to say that it's just women who are treated a certain way, because it affects everyone. The hierarchical nature of patriarchy affects everyone, but women are not at the top of it. So women are really considered second-class citizens in the patriarchal structure. So I have about a half an hour, and it's, to cover 6,000 years in a half an hour, it's not really that easy. But what I want to do is just maybe read, this is from the book. Yeah. So I'm just going to read a couple couple things from this, what I wrote in the book. Let's see. So, and my view about healing trauma is through spirituality, as it says there, and so I'm going to put that in a bit of a context for you and say what that actually means. So the first shamans were women. Shamanic wisdom came out of a group of women sitting together and sometimes dreaming together. During a woman's menstrual time, she was often cloistered and did not partake of the daily life of the community. She was cared for by the community and fed, and it was a time of meditation and visioning, especially in the company of other women. It was a sacred time. The female group was the healer for the community. So it was like, in the early times, from what I've learned, it wasn't just one person, it was the female group that was the shaman, that gave healing and nurturing and care to the community, the female group. So if you just think about that for a minute, it's like, okay, well, where are the female groups in our communities doing this? Because that is what determined the health of a community, was the health of the women. Women were respected for their advice and direction. Everyone knew that the health of the community depended on respect for women. Euro-Western culture has lost touch with this sacred meaning. Patriarchal culture denies the female-generated power of life in our blood. So why is it important to discuss patriarchy? In my view, we discuss it all the time without naming it, especially in school. We subject children all the time to the history of war, conquerors, pillagers, cruel kings, empires, great warrior heroes, so-called civilizations that were known for greatness while they were built on oppression. Violence, thievery, greed, slavery, racism, sexism, genocide, rape, and the list goes on. So, and those, they're not really, those things are embedded in our patriarchal culture, and they're embedded in the military. So this is patriarchy. These legacies are still very much alive. Patriarchy is a male-dominated, hierarchical social structure with men at the top ruling over others. Yes, there are some women that do that too, but by and large, it has been men for the last 6,000 years doing this. And it's not about, okay, saying men are bad. We're not saying that. It's not about that. It's just identifying the problem. And as I said, patriarchy affects everyone. So, and it is predominantly white males at the top. I mean, I think we can all agree. If you just look at the conquering, pillaging that's gone on, over time, we'll see that in the world. So, patriarchy made women the first slaves, and it has now become a system in which some women participate. And maybe you've heard of The Handmaid's Tale, by Margaret Atwood. It was made into a series,
It's a TV show.
Yeah.
I was talking the movie when I was
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
I should have.
well, not as a child.
I need to produce.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it was scary, and I'm not watching the TV show, so I don't know
Yeah.
if anyone here has watched it. It just seems to be wrong.
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Anyway, it is, I think it was on Netflix or something, but, okay. So, foundational tenet of patriarchy, as I said, is that women are considered less than. There are certain unwritten codes males follow in patriarchy in order to keep women oppressed. These codes are enacted in everyday life, within the family, politics, government, religion, education, and in the military. It is my view that the most egregious code is sexual dominance, control, and suppression of female sexuality. We're seeing that being acted out just in our government now. Rape and all sexual assault are tools men can use to ensure that their self-written codes stay in place. And I learned a lot about that from Barb. In fact, during times of catastrophic and disastrous events, male rape and sexual violence against women increases. So nobody talks about that ever. We do that. It is not a surprise that MST occurs within the military ranks. Rape is also used as a tool of war against the enemy, creating a form of genocide. I mean, that's happened for eons. Patriarchy as a cultural norm is global. These male codes of domination know no cultural bounds. Men also assert their control through gang rape, which they enact within the military and outside of it. Another form of this code is the narcissistic male concern with governing women's bodies, like I said, and women's choice about what we decide about our own bodies. All codes boil down to sexual oppression and control by males. So again, it's not about men are bad. That's not what this is about. It's identifying deeply embedded psychopathological conditions that affect everyone. So that need to be healed. And the men who experience this stuff, they need the healing too. So, oh, I'm wearing glasses. Okay, so trauma-informed care for the women that healing through spirituality. Okay. Some of it is a little bit redundant. Okay.
Here we go.
So I define patriarchy. So these images are interesting. You know, the one on the bottom is Perseus with Medusa's head. And the one on the right is a Babylonian from about the second millennium BCE stabbing a female figure in her womb. I mean, it's just like I said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so this kind of stuff is embedded in mythology that we teach our children. And so women are treated as second-class citizens, women are treated as sex objects. Written mythology is violent rape mythology. Zeus is a mad serial rapist. And we teach this mythology like it's normal to kids. And people get PhDs in this stuff. You know, it's like, why do we do that? Why do we accept rape mythology as something that we should be teaching at all? So patriarchy is hierarchical, as I said, it's based on dominance, and women are around the world seriously dominated in patriarchy. Okay. So what is a therapist? Therapy comes from the Latin therapia. One attends to the needs of the soul. So that book, The Creation of Patriarchy, we have it here, is an astounding history, many lessons about how it was created and where it came from, and we're still living in it. So in spiritual healing work, the practitioner looks to find what those needs are in a traumatized woman. And I feel like that if we're gonna talk about trauma, we need to see how that woman is traumatized by patriarchy. The practitioner is not the expert. The practitioner is a guide and steps out of the way as much as possible to allow healing to emerge from within the woman she is sitting with. So there's no hierarchy. It's not a hierarchy. It's a collaborative experience. This means deep listening, being skilled in the art of inquiry and knowing how to establish trust and a reciprocal relationship as equals. Because she has as much to teach me as I do her. In spiritual healing work with women, it is essential to understand the compromised position women have endured in patriarchy, and to understand the inequality and PTSD that all women have suffered for millennia. This trauma is intergenerational. It is advisable that for practitioners who do not have a feminist perspective, to do individual practicum to learn about this intergenerational trauma. It's like the elephant in the living room, and it is not talked about except except among women or feminists who study this, or feminist therapists who know about it and know how to approach healing with that background. But the general mainstream therapeutic community doesn't talk about it. So in my work, I work with healing through shamanism. So what is shamanism? Is a spiritual, non-religious, nature-based, cross-cultural, millennium-old method for restoring wholeness to mind, body, and spirit. It is about living in harmony and learning the practice of accessing wisdom and knowledge from the unseen realms for healing. There are many ways shamanism can be used as an adjunct to therapy as well as a standalone modality. There is an indigenous saying from the Chukchi people in Siberia that say that all women by nature are shamans. So what if we just own that? What if we just owned it? I mean, we know, I mean, I would prefer that you speak about this because in many indigenous communities, it is the clan mothers and the councils of clan mothers that are the governing body of the community. We don't have those. The people who wrote our Constitution borrowed the Constitution from the Iroquois Federation, and they left that part out. They left out the governing body as the Council of Clan Owners. They left it out. If we had that in place, we would be doing a lot better. We would be a lot. Okay, so something's getting blocked from the. So some examples of shamanic practices in healing trauma. So soul retrieval is an old practice. It helps. It's a practice that is said when there's been trauma. There's a splitting or like a fragmenting of the soul, and you can. The way I work is I can work as the shamanic practitioner to help restore those fragments to the body, bringing them back to the body, or I encourage maybe the woman that I'm working with to participate and also do it herself, and we work together in doing that. It's a really old practice in indigenous cultures. Power animal retrieval is also an old practice. That power animals are a connection with the spirit of animal wisdom. Some of this is like sort of woo-woo new age weirdness that's gotten floating around. Like I see people saying, well, my spirit animal is this, and it's just weird. It's It's disrespectful. You, in connecting with the natural world, you connect with living life energies that you can connect with and call upon for healing, and animal wisdom is one of them. I work with something called the Four Fields Empowerment. It's just helping a woman realize who she is and different aspects of herself and how she can call on these different aspects. Most people are wandering around leading their in adult life from a wounded child place, trying to get some needs filled, trying to assuage loneliness, trying to find peace, trying to, there are other aspects. And as an adult, we don't want to lead from a wounded child. We don't want to do that. And we don't want to teach our kids to do that. So journeying is a shamanic practice of working with a drum and learning how to access energy from some people call it non-ordinary reality, unseen realms. These things have been practiced for cross-culturally for thousands of years. So inquiry is just something that I call just being present with the person, sitting with the person, doing inquiry with them, finding out what is present in that moment and what is calling for healing. Hands-on body work, probably we've all experienced that. Grounding practices in nature, going into nature, doing some simple rituals in nature, and then grounding practices in daily life, doing just some very simple practices. Some people would maybe say meditation, some people would say maybe just sitting quietly and being just present, not thinking, or not identifying with thoughts, because you just can't really necessarily stop thinking, but the thoughts come and they go like clouds, like that, and you just don't identify, you don't follow them, you don't get distracted, and you watch those kinds of processes in yourself. So thank you. Okay. So how's our time?
It's almost 2.
Okay, so I'm probably not going to read all of this, but basically it's when I'm sitting with someone and working in a shamanic way, it's like calling in the energies that are present at the time to help elucidate what needs healing. And so, yeah, I think you could just go over that.
Okay.
So some questions to ask in the first session, and what brings you here today? This is part of the inquiry. How does your problem benefit you? Sometimes we have these problems and we're very identified with them, and they give us a sense of identity. So if we can answer that question, well, I get attention, or I feel seen. If I have this problem, I can talk about it, I can be heard, things like that. And then in what ways does the problem limit you? How would your life be different if this was no longer an issue or a problem? And what do you need to do to make the change? So the practitioner then chooses which methods to use in order to help the client with the best outcome, creating a reciprocal bond. In my experience, the reciprocal bond is like very powerful in healing. It's foundational because it fosters safety and it eliminates hierarchy. If you really practice reciprocity with who you're working with. Okay, I think that's it. So,
Some good questions.
Should I pause here
for questions or comments or
before we move on to the next thing? Take a break.
keep going. Keep going. Okay.
All right, then.
Okay. Thank you.
So I will, I'll segue into the training. But we thought the film was important because this is where the people are coming from when they arrive at your, at your agency, right? Or they call for a meeting. So I want to be clear that when we're talking about trauma-informed care, how do you take care of people, even if you don't know about their trauma, right? So these women, they are so brave. And they tell their story on a documentary that lives forever. Most people are not doing that. They're not even telling us, their healers, their practitioners, these stories. They're not even telling their doctors, they're not telling their parents, right? So that means we just have to act from a place of, let's just treat everyone as gentle, right? Let's just treat everyone this way. That way we don't re-traumatize anyone, regardless of their trauma. How about we not do that? So while this presentation is in two parts, right? It's the organization and the individual level. I do focus a lot on women, but I do want to remind you that it happens to all genders. And we do have a lot of different gender identities that we talk about more openly now, but they're all negatively impacted by the trauma. And they're all negatively affected by the patriarchy. Like men are also being harmed by the patriarchy. They're not able to be harmed. They can't tell someone that they've been because they have to man up, that kind of thing. And so we want to ensure that everyone that comes across to us and those that work with us are treated carefully. So everything that we talk about today can be generalized for all the people that we serve now and in the future, right? So some of you have talked about kind of doing this work in the future. Okay, so the next slide. So I do think that I want to start out with a hopeful message because the stories are so hard to hear and the outcomes are so disappointing. But that's our military. That healing can happen, right? But I don't think anyone becomes healed easy. I don't think that's how it happens. I don't want anyone to think that there's some linear path to this process because there are hiccups, right? So we're humans and we're on a healing journey and then something new might happen and now we have a setback, right? Because it reminded us of the original trauma and we need to start the healing process again. So healing happens in relation with others. So in a book on trauma-informed care, it's focused on women veterans who have experienced military sexual trauma, mainly because that's who we were thinking needed the most help. That's not to negate the experiences of other victims, but the student, or the woman that had the idea for the book, that was her personal experience and she just had enough. Right, she had just had enough and didn't know what else to do with all the rage, all the anger, all the hurt, and all the pain. And so each time we provide services to a woman veteran, using trauma-informed care, we're trying to provide them with a healthy professional interaction, right? So a few times I've been involved with clients and we've talked about having a corrective experience. So that means somewhere in your life, you've experienced a trauma, something very horrible has happened, and nothing was rectified, nothing was repaired. And then as an adult or later on in life, you have a different experience, and it is repaired, right? And so some of that corrective experiencing can happen if we practice trauma-informed care, right? So I have clients who they have gone to a dentist or a specialist or a therapist, even I'm embarrassed to say, and they've been treated horribly. And why I was triggered by this, and in my mind, I'm saying they didn't know that could happen to you, and so that question wasn't meant to cause the harm that it did, but it happened to you. So intent is not matter. We're talking about causing harm. Like it's great that you didn't intend to harm someone, but you did with the way you asked the question. So let's change the way we're asking the question and avoid causing harm, right? So the problem is though that that person that I'm thinking about hadn't gone to the dentist in years, hadn't gone to any medical provider because they were so afraid it would happen again. And so they're neglecting their care. So when they do finally get help, they're going to urgent care, the ER, and now their options for treatment are limited. So one of the goals for trauma-informed care is to help people keep on top of their medical and mental health. So we cannot undo all that has been done to the women that you saw in the film and the people that we know and those of us that have experienced trauma. We can't undo all that, but we can control how that person experiences service delivery with us. We can make sure they're going to have a healthy experience with us. We can control that, right? And that can help start that healing process by avoiding harm and doing good. That's what we want to do. Whenever you show respect, kindness, acceptance, we're practicing a healing form of helping. Like, oh, I'm accepted here. Like, that's a thing. You believe me. Right? I know that sounds weird, but they had to teach us in school, believe your client. Some of my colleagues were absent, right? They still don't believe women or men who report sexual violence. I don't think that's what really happened, something else. And I always just cringe because that means they've given that energy or said that statement to that person. So can you imagine all the courage it takes to finally tell your story and to have someone say it didn't happen, right? Or that you're making it up. Or they were talking about being charged with filing a false report. That's to keep you from reporting, and that's to keep you from talking. So when we are working with people that have trauma, this may be the first healthy professional relationship they have had, right, with the provider. And I'm going to be honest with you, they may not know how to respond. If they're not used to kindness, the first instinct is distrust. Why are you being nice? What do you want? What are you doing? Right? So even though your intent is good and you're going to try your trauma-informed principles that you learned today, it's not always going to be a positive response to that because of all the thousand cuts of trauma that they've experienced. So just be prepared for this because trust takes time. I can't imagine picking out what I want to do with the rest of my life and being excited about joining the military and being excited about serving and being excited about all these different steps that they have, and then just having someone violate you. Horrible. I'm just going to go up the chain of command. I'm going to do what I was told to do. And the response is either to punish you, to ignore you, or they probably do it too, right? And so that's a horrible experience. And I cannot imagine trusting someone after that, right? So we want to make sure that we're still gentle and prepared when they do respond negatively to us, because they're not responding to us, but they don't trust you. And they shouldn't. They're not ready yet, and that's okay. So just be patient with them as they learn to trust us. And then you need to mean what you say and say what you mean, right? They have been through enough, right? They have been through enough. So if you don't mean it, please don't say it. Please don't use words and phrases to fill the time because you're uncomfortable with silence. Just be quiet, right? Just be quiet. It's okay for silence to be there. You also want to be patient as these people learn or understand what it's like to be in a healthy professional interaction with the provider. Because you're going to be doing some things, and we'll talk about them later, like giving them choice and giving them options, and that's not been their experience. Someone I know in the VA, they would just schedule appointments for people and mail out letters, right? So you didn't even have a choice of the day and time that you would meet and where you would go receive your services. So no one's saying, are you a morning person? Do you prefer the afternoon? And are you busy on this day, right? None of that happens. And then if you can't make the appointment, you have to call and reschedule, and sometimes there's notes in the chart about you being unreliable, things like that. And so it's very hard for the people that have been traumatized to accept a healthy interaction with a provider, a new provider. So this journey, this healing journey that I was talking about that the women are on, it's going to be filled with bumps and detours. And you might be part of that detour, part of that bump, and that's okay. So as long as you are practicing trauma-informed care principles, you're helping them to continue their healing journey, especially in a healthcare setting, right? That's when we're at our most vulnerable. I remember the first time I had to go to the doctor, and they're like, I'll put this little piece of paper on and I'll come back. If I get naked in a room and it's cold and I don't know you, I'll be back. And I just thought, can I, and I was new, so I'm like teenagers, I'm like, can I have someone with me? Can you bring in someone? Because it's the man, right, that I don't know. Can someone else be here to, and we want to teach women that they can ask for those things. You don't have to be in a room by yourself with a man if you feel unsafe. You can actually request a female provider. You can actually request that someone accompany them. You don't have to be in that uncomfortable, triggering situation. And that's not to say anything against that provider, that male provider. They may have, you know, positive intentions, but because of your trauma, now you're triggered. And some women will just leave. Okay, next time. They'll just leave you. But recovery is possible. So women who are in recovery from trauma may sometimes feel that recovery and life is an uphill battle. And it is. I think about people that have an addiction and they talk about having to make that choice every day to stay sober. It's the same for people with trauma. Like you have to wake up every day like, I'm going to do this. All over again, I'm going to trust. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go out there. That's exhausting. That is exhausting. If that's not your personal experience, let me just say, and please believe me when I say that is an exhausting experience. Imagine that is exhausting, and then your day is filled with medical complaints, right? Imagine one of those people would say they don't believe that you're in pain. You're probably fine. It's like I was going to give my best today, and then this, right? And if you're the last appointment of the day that they're sitting, you're not going to get them best. Because someone along the way has probably harmed them again. So we know it to be like a daily recommitment to a new path in the life they want to live. We know that each day the women in trauma recovery have to recommit to a new path, even on their worst days, right? So you might have a partner, you might have a job, you might have kids, you have dogs, like you have all these other parts of yourself that require all of this energy. And you still have yourself to carry around. And I know that a lot of people think if I move here, if I get this job, or if I date this person, you're still taking you with you, right? So all that stuff is coming wherever you go. So we also want to just remind them, and we want to keep in mind that trauma recovery is possible. This moment they're in, this space they're in won't last forever. And we can help them understand that. We don't sell hope. We don't do that. Like, oh, things will be better. We don't know that. And it might not get better. I'll be honest. I work with people with severe mental illness and it doesn't get better for them. So we don't want to say that. It's like, oh, it'll get better, you'll be fine. I think we say that because we're nervous about the content and because we're filling silent space. Just put your lips together. Sit on your hands if you have to, but whatever you don't say those cliched sentences that we say to help people feel better. It's okay to feel like crap. They were traumatized. Sit with it. Sit with it with them. Right? Some people call it being a witness. So just sit with them and their experience. But it is possible to make a new choice each day to improve their quality of life by taking care of trauma symptoms, using recommendations from like a trauma psychiatrist, other mental health professionals, so they can learn healthier ways of coping. Because whenever we experience trauma, one of the things our body and our brain does is go into survival mode, and they got it, that's right. Because we're able to get over that path. Because not everyone survives trauma, and I think it's important to leave space for them too. Like not everyone made it to do this. Some people did. Some people did get killed during the act. So the people that did survive, with whatever skills they're using to cope, let's thank those skills. and send them on their way, because usually you don't need them anymore after the danger is. Okay. So this is what we'll be talking about today. These are the different components of trauma-informed care. And this is for both levels of service, right? So even if you're in an organization or you're just doing it by yourself, you want to make sure the person feels safe. You want to make sure they trust you, that they have choice always, that it's a collaboration. And Leslie was talking about not having a hierarchy. That's what collaboration is about. We're not going to have that, I'm the expert, you do what I say. No, I went to school, so I have some skills, but you're the expert in you. And so we're going to work together on this. We're going to share that power that person has. And we're going to collaborate. That is so foreign to so many people that they're actually angry with you when you make comments. I thought church was going to tell me what to do, right? That's what they're used to. And so teaching them how to collaborate is an uphill battle for you. That's your price. And then the last one is empowerment. We're not going to give empowerment by saying, you can do it. That's right. You got this. That's toxic positivity when someone has survived trauma. They don't got this, right? Where they don't. I know individuals who were, I'm thinking of a friend, right? She goes to Starbucks and she tells them her name and they got it wrong. Like they didn't spell right, I think they pronounced it wrong or they wrote the wrong name down, something like that happened. And she just spelled it completely different. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Right, at Starbucks, we're trying to get a latte and this is what's happening. She was like, I'm just so tired of not being seen. Right, and so and I'm not saying Starbucks should be trauma-informed care. I know that's a lot to ask, but someone not getting her name right was the last straw that we heard. Right, so I don't care where you are in your healing journey, you have those days, right? So there are 5 components up there about trauma-informed care. And we want to make sure that this is happening from the first point of contact when they call for an appointment until the last follow-up point of contact, right? So like maybe billing or someone calling for a satisfaction survey or the person that calls to reschedule the appointment. Every point of contact needs to have all 5 of these in place. So what does safe mean when we're talking about trauma-informed care? So creating a safe space for patients and clients to see healthcare professionals is imperative for providing trauma-informed care. Safe relationships are consistent, they are predictable, and they are non-shaming. I need you, if I am recovering from trauma, I need you to be the same person to me today that you were last week. I'm going to need you to say that, have the same approach to me that you had last week. Whatever was okay last week, you cannot change it this week, right? So even if it's a boundary, like if you're 15 minutes late, you'll have to reschedule. And I come in 20 minutes late and I'm expecting to reschedule and say, oh no, I'll see you today. Believe it or not, that is harmful. Please stick with policies, right? They need something they can rely on. So I can just do anything. Can I show up at any time? Because the next time they come in and we're 15 minutes late, you will say, oh, you have to reschedule. That's harmful. Right, so it was okay this time, it wasn't okay this time. It's when do I know when it's okay? So I know consistency and predictability sound mean in that example, but it's what the individual needs to feel safe. And trust. So our patients and our clients must trust us in order for us to provide services for them to consider our evidence-based recommendations. So whatever we're trying to tell someone, I think this might work. Maybe let's try this out and see what happens. For them to trust what you're saying, they need to be able to feel comfortable with you. And it takes time to establish that trust, especially with this population, because we just talked about their past, right? So if they've had people that are inconsistent, not predictable, and shaming, there are a lot of medical professionals that say things that like you should stop eating the cookies. Oh my, that is so not appropriate right now. Like I maybe you're thinking that, but that is not the time and place for this. Like that's not helpful for anyone. But people, medical professionals can say some horrible things. And so we don't want to be in that. We don't want to say those horrible things. But clients trust spaces and people that clearly communicate to them. So if you don't know something, please be vulnerable enough and honest enough to say, I don't know, I'll find that information out and give it back to you. Don't try to just wing it, and don't try to be vague so that you can get back to it later. Just be upfront. And you're role modeling for them. This is what you say when you don't have the answer. This is what you say when you don't know something. Right? And then we have choice, which is, we all love choice, right? We love choice so much that I think the US has like 1,000 different cereals. And so people that come here always talk about our cereal. And I've only been to a few other countries, into the grocery stores. We rock on the cereal choices. They're not all good, but we have so many options. Even from one brand, we have 1,000 options. So we clearly like choice. Choice and freedom are synonymous. The healthcare system in this country, we can't apologize for it because that's what we got, right? It's overwhelming and it's confusing to navigate. If you are privileged enough to be part of that system, please use your privilege to help someone navigate. No, you know what, don't call that person, call this person after 5, because you'll get a better staff. You know, whatever shortcuts you need, tell the person so that they can use them well. So to balance this unfortunate experience, for people who have experienced trauma, and the unfortunate experience I'm talking about is the healthcare of this country. I'm not a patriot when it comes to our healthcare system, and especially the mental health care system. You want to give them a choice when there is space to do so. If you are short-staffed, for example, you can't give them a choice of who to see because it has to be whoever's available on that day. Then please don't offer that option and say, oh, I wish we could. That's not helpful, right? So only offer options and choice when there's space to do so. So you might want to reevaluate office policies and create space for choice in any area that takes a lot of work. But you don't have to do this in one day. It can be done over a year, but you're making small steps to providing trauma and care. So why is trust so important for people recovering from trauma? Unfortunately, research has told us that experiences of trauma often leave the person feeling powerless with little or no choice or control over what has happened. And this is at any age that this is happening, right? So when you are violated, when you are traumatized, of course you can choose it, but you also have no choice of what's happening in the moment or what comes after, right? So let's try to help them with the corrective experience and give them a little bit of their power back. Yeah. Compliance is a choice, right? But it is not consent, and it still leaves the person feeling powerless. So I know a lot of people who experience, especially sexual trauma, are confused about compliance. That's not the same. Giving in or trying to make sure you don't get killed, right, is not the same as choosing to enthusiastically be involved in the act, right? It's not the same thing. So saying, let's just get this over with so I can get out of here and never see this person again, that is actually a survival skill. If you think about it though, it becomes maladaptive in other areas. And so that's one of the things that we have to teach people to unlearn. But compliance, while a choice, it still leaves a person feeling powerless. And it can be confusing for our clients that we work with. And in the medical community, I think we're all socialized this way. I hope that we're all adults and so we've broken out of this, but you are required to be a good patient and be compliant with the doctor. That means don't ask questions, don't say no, don't ask for a second opinion, right? All of those things. And we have to help people unlearn. You can't say no. No, I don't want that treatment. Are there any other options? I'll just go home and die there. That's my choice. Give it to me, right? I don't have to go through whatever you're proposing here. If that's all we can come up with as a society, that's okay. I want to stay in the hospital doing all this treatment. I will go home and die with my family. That's a choice, and we should be able to respect that for people. And then collaboration goes along with that, right? So most patients that we work with have been socialized since early childhood. Like I said, that healthcare people are the experts. And usually anyone in their staff, so these individuals that I'm talking about, they don't just see us as the professionals. Anyone that works with us, they're assuming they know too. Right, so everyone is being assumed to know more than them. And they have this, I have to do what this person says. And they don't. So they think they should listen to us and follow our guidance, but they can also ask questions. So we can break this habit, believe it or not, by helping our patients learn to work with us. Right? Let's work on this together. Let's figure out how we're going to do this. So I use words like we and us and our when I'm working with clients, so that they know I'm not going to be telling you to do anything, right? We are going to take this journey together. And that helps at least change the viewpoint, the mindset. So the patient is the expert, just like we are. So we have our backgrounds and our lived experiences that drew us to the helping profession, and that's what we're going to use to help this person. But the patient is the expert with their body. They know their body way better than we do. Their mind, their environment, their medical or mental health condition. And we want to partner with them for their care. We don't want to be the person prescribing them something without asking if it's working. But one of the issues is a lot of people with trauma are disconnected from their body, disconnected from them. They're so used to numbing out, disassociating, that they're not even sure they're present when they're with you. You want to be able to tell when someone leaves the room with you, though, right? Like, oh, I can see I've lost you. Let's back up. Like that's collaborating. You don't just keep going. You know they check it out. You know they're don't keep giving them information that they cannot retain. So slow down, go back, maybe do a grounding exercise and try it again. And then finally, empowerment. So once we've done all of the above, right? We've created some safety, they trust us, we've given them choice, we've collaborated with them. We want to make sure that they naturally feel empowered to take charge of their own medical and mental health care. If we provide the first 4, we naturally arrive at it, right? Without all that false hope and false promises. Okay, so the next one. Now I don't know if this will work, but I have this breathing exercise. And I know we like to power through stuff, right? But I do want to kind of reset, prime the pump, as they say. So hopefully if we click on this, the sound will tap. If it doesn't, that's okay too.
We'll give her a go.
I can't tell what's good.
Potential security concern.
Oh, no, let's not do that. I don't know what that
The link may be harmful to my computer and data.
Okay, let's not do
Is
that.
is it a trustworthy source?
No.
You do not know that. Okay.
All right, I will tell the truth. I don't know.
All right.
Okay, so on YouTube, there are these quick breathing exercises. I usually do something similar in sessions with clients. Like, you know what, this is too heavy, let's take a break. And we stop and we do a breathing exercise. Sometimes, depending on how the person arrives in the session, I do it at the beginning. They're like, ooh, okay, you brought a lot to do today. Before we get started, let's do this. And sometimes I do it at the end as well to help close the loop. Right. So sometimes I feel like I'm breaking open some kind of egg when people are talking about their trauma, but I don't want them to leave the office like raw and unpeeled and stuff. And so we do breathing exercises just to bring people back to who they are. That makes any sense. So that's okay. Please let me know if I'm going too fast or if I need to, okay, so, all right. So next slide, please. So I don't think anyone here is running an agency. Is that true? No, okay, I thought that from your, so I think we might skip this part.
Okay.
Because it wouldn't apply and you don't have it. Right, so it has to be, it has to be some, oh, but this is recorded.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
never mind. All right.
I'm sorry. So, so for those of you that this doesn't apply to, you might think about those suggestion boxes where you go to get your care and ask for some of these things, right? That's another way you can use this information. So we want people that run an organization or an agency, right? The people that control the training and onboarding, all of that, right? What can they do to let women veterans know, or other people that are recovering from trauma, how do we let them know they're welcome in our office setting? So we will take all those 5 components that we talked about, and they're supposed to be at an organization or the agency or company level. So we want to make sure all staff understand trauma and its impact. They don't have to take a class, we don't need it, right? We don't need that kind of stuff. But closing the office for a day-long training, or paying staff to come in on a day when the office is normally closed to do the training would be respectful. Asking people to do free emotional labor is not respectful, right? So either you're going to close the office on a day that they would be paid to work, or you're going to close the office and pay them for the training. But you do want to spend a day helping them learn not just about trauma, but its impact. I do not recommend squeezing the training into regular office hours. Oh, we'll do that after the meeting. Because learning about trauma, it's not like learning a recipe, right? For how to cook something. Staff will need space and time to practice self-care and process all of that information, because people that run organizations and agencies, they don't know who in their staff has experienced trauma later. And staff, right? It would just seem inappropriate. And they probably don't trust the person that makes. I've never trusted anyone that was evaluating me, or that was in charge of hiring and firing me, not to tell them, oh yeah, I'm a trauma survivor. That just doesn't fit into, and I'm in the healthy program. So if it doesn't fit into my field, I can only imagine what else is going on there, right? So we want them to promote emotional and physical safety among the staff. Make sure everyone who works for you feels safe in the office, so that they are emotionally available to help patients feel safe, right? So if someone doesn't feel safe because people are loitering, or because someone in the office has sexually harassed them, let's not let that continue. Let's nip that in the bud so that everyone feels safe at work. If you feel safe, you have the space to make someone else feel safe. They also should schedule another day of training regarding cultural competence for their specific region or caseload. I think we have this cultural competence or diversity, equity, inclusion stuff in some kind of can, and that's just not appropriate. Every culture, every space is different, every region is different. I just moved from San Francisco to rural Illinois. It is very different. Like, those are very different conversations to have. And so we shouldn't have just one training, workbook for different regions. We want to address where we live and where we serve people. And it would be the same thing. They would close the office or pay staff to come in on a day when the office is closed. So the cultural competence training may not appear to be overwhelming, but learning about cultural competency practices involve a new language, a new way of thinking, diverse groups of people, and staff still may need time to process that new content and reflect on their own cultural values. I remember the first time I learned about the gay and trans community and trying to pair that with what I grew up hearing from the Midwest, if you know what I mean, right? Strict Christian Baptist upbringing, trying to balance what I was hearing with what I grew up hearing. That's exhausting. That takes a lot of time. And so we don't want to rush through that either. We want to give people time to let go of some things that are unhealthy and then embrace the new content. We also want to make sure that the organization or agency supports and advocates for patient control, patient choice, patient autonomy. So that means that people that are offering appointments or offering treatment should say things like, these are your options, versus providing whatever their preferred professional guidance is. And I've heard Dr. Well, I prefer this. But I'm a civilian. I didn't go to medical school. I don't know what the other options are. Can you give me another choice? Maybe I want to do something else, even if you don't like it or you don't think it's okay. Please let me know what my options are so I can make an informed choice, as opposed to telling me what you prefer people do in my position. Learn how to share power, like we've talked about before. If they share power with the staff, right, if there's no hierarchy in the organization, it will naturally mean there's no hierarchy when you're serving others. And so I know that takes a lot of solid to get to, but you can do that by seeking feedback before making agency-wide changes that will impact the staff and clients. Nothing is more stressful or demoralizing than to receive new office policies in a memo or some kind of email or probably a text these days, I don't know. And then ask staff to enforce it or implement changes without explaining the purpose of the changes, without listening to their feedback. Prior to the announcement, clients feel blindsided and staff feel powerless when clients ask, why did you change things? Right, and they told me to do this, so I'm doing it, right? That was very common in the VA. If something was changed, you were just expected to follow orders. And then that means you feel powerless because you may think, oh, this doesn't make any sense. But if you understood where it came from, you may be able to explain to the client. Now the client feels like, why am I coming here if you don't even know what you're doing? Right? And so it's a good idea not to make a big change without talking to everyone, or at least letting them know. I'm having a conversation about it, helping everyone get on the same page, because all of us have had lots of work experience in this room. If you've ever been in a space where the upper people have never done their job and they make some change, they have no idea what it's going to look like before. You're like, are you kidding me? That's not going to work down here. And they've never asked because they don't see it that way. They're still participating in the patriarchy. I'm the dad or mom, you do what I say. That's not trauma to treat your staff that way. They're people too. As much as possible, try to integrate care with patients. So that everyone at the organization working in a silo with the same patient, arrange weekly meetings where the entire team can discuss the person, right? So if I'm calling and leaving someone a message, you may know, oh, they've been transferred to hospice. I need that information. I need to know that so that I can then provide support maybe to the family or something else. But if we're working in silos and not communicating, then I won't know. I will just keep calling, right? So we can also do things where we do warm handoffs, as we call them, whenever it's possible, to avoid giving clients like a list of paper. Go meet with this person down the hall or across the street or whatever. If time permits, either make a phone call or something, which is what I usually do because I'm not walking all over the place. But you call them, hey, I'm going to refer blank to you, right? Oh, this piece of information signed. So they may give you a call in the week, this week or next week, and they're coming in for this. Now that person, when they call the number, it's not a cold call. People are expecting them to call and they can say, oh yeah, so-and-so told me you would call. When I have not done that for some people, the way they're treated is so embarrassing. I was trying to find a support group for a man I was working with who had schizophrenia. And he just needed some social support, free, right? So I found some free support groups and I was calling around to see which one would be more appropriate for his backstory, right? He had some things going on. I wanted to make sure he fit in with the group. I called this one agency who, of course, he would have referred to. And as soon as I explained why I was going to, well, make sure he's not just coming here for the free snack. I'm so tired of those Medicaid people. And she just starts thinking, if he has worked so hard to get to where he is, if I had given him her phone number and not called first, he would have heard her say these horrible things. So if you can, please do a warm. It's like using your power and privilege to kind of vouch for someone. I know that sounds wrong, but if you can speak for someone before they get there, people usually treat them nicer because they know someone is looking out for them. I'm embarrassed that that's how it works, even in the helping profession, but it is. What are you here for? As opposed to, oh, someone says that you be silent. It's a very different feeling. And I'm sorry that has to happen, but that's why we do the warm handoff so we can. Sometimes, though, you can't always call or walk them over to the office. So you can send an introductory email. I do that a lot. That saves a lot of time. Like, here are the two emails. So and so, I'm introducing the two of you, so you can set up an appointment to do this, right? And then, It's informal, the person can respond whenever they want, it's not something where they require immediate action, but they're connected. And now they have a number, they have a way to, they have a name, they have an email address, they have a way to contact them when they're ready for their appointment. And again, they feel welcome, right? They feel welcome. So remember that healing happens in the relationship, we brought that up. But that means all relationships, from a person answering the phones to the security guard. So in the VA, for example, the VA didn't hire security guards or janitors. They contract all of that out. So it doesn't matter how much trauma-informed care training we're doing, the cleaning staff, right, and the security guards are not doing that. And so that's something that an organization or agency would need to pay attention to. So finally, remind staff and patients to that trauma recovery is possible, like we said before, because so many people think they are broken after a trauma. They think that they're no good, that they're damaged goods. They will even use that language sometimes to describe themselves. Right? So it's our job, believe it or not, to help them reframe their experience. While we wish the trauma never happened, we know that the trauma should not have occurred, right? We want to remind them of their resilience, like, wow, you're one of the people that survived this. How did you do that? Right? And have people share their resilience story. That is such a different place of empowerment than 80 details about that sort of incident, right? Or several incidents for people with complex trauma, right? So the idea of talking about how did you get over that, or how did you cope with that, how did you survive that? That's important because you're going to hear their strengths, and you're going to hear who's their support system that they may have forgotten about or not even counted. Like, no, everyone does that. No, they don't. Right? They did that to help you, so that's a person you can actually count on. They may not even know who in their life is a support for them, if that makes any sense. So you may be able to help with that. And then this gives the staff and the patients hope, right? Because life is not a so they're trauma. Okay, the next. So this is some ways to bring safety to a space. For example, the resource webpage should provide local resources for basic needs like addressing homelessness, hunger, weather-appropriate clothing, financial resources. We have to admit that we live in this country with this crazy healthcare system, and people will have large bills. So any financial resources that your agency knows about for medical debt or paying for medical care should be there, especially domestic violence resources. I am so glad when I go into airports and see all these human trafficking stickers and different things you can do, and how there's a lot of information going about how to call 911 and pretend you're ordering a pizza, but you're talking about being in a situation you need to be rescued from. Have you all seen those?
I haven't seen that.
So you will call and you'll say, I'm ordering a pizza, and you'll just announce that, oh, no, this is the wrong number. And you keep saying it until the operator gets it. Like, okay. And then they ask questions. For example, they'll say, do you want a pepperoni pizza? If the person is armed, say yes. If they are not, armed, say no, right? And so, yes, I like pepperoni pizza. Yes, I want a lot of pepperoni, whatever it is, right? And so you're saying things, you have to give an address, you have to confirm the identity of you and where you are. So they're getting all the information they need to send someone out to the location to help the person.
Can I ask a
All
question?
guys of ordering pizza.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
My brain immediately went to, wow, that is a really cool tool. I would love to share that with a lot of people so that they know it if they're in that situation. But how do you prevent a perpetrator from accessing that information and knowing
You
that?
can't, right? But usually what you can do is the person is supposed to use the same voice, right? Now, you're not whispering, you want to talk loud so that they can hear too. And one of the examples that they've shown online, you can hear the perpetrator still being verbally abusive. I don't want to watch, I said a meeting, and just like they're still doing it.
They're not listening.
But no, we can't.
Yeah,
So if they catch on, we'll have to use something.
you have to try something else.
And thanks for bringing that up.
Oh, sure.
There's hand signals too.
Oh, like in the car?
And, well, even, gosh, I just saw something like this. And then how, somebody knew that signal in a mall and they knew, and and got the woman that was using the signal,
But yes, I've heard that story. I've heard someone doing it in a car, like someone in
that too.
a car, and they give it to another driver, and that
Yeah,
driver can
yeah,
call her.
yeah.
What is the code? I think you can, unfortunately, you can Google it. Right.
Was it hand signals?
Yeah.
I thought they do hand signals like, to let, you know, like, well, there's several, yeah, I saw another one where a woman was on there. And she was, writing something and, anyway, I forget, but you can Google it,
Unfortunately, I mean, the perpetrators can see it too, but it's how, if you want to recognize the symptoms, right?
Right.
You want to understand how the person
right.
Dave, I mean, TikTok is one, right? So that's where these trends have come from. Someone saying do this or, you know, do that. And I think, for example, right when the Roe v. Wade thing was reversed and the states, you know, couldn't wait to make things horrible, they started posting, hey, if you want to go camping in my area, I'll come pick you up and bring you here. And so that was the code, but then the government found it. So it didn't work after they found out. But people were willing to drive to your state, come get you and bring you camping in their state. But then the people found out. So. But we also want to make sure the websites have things like suicide crisis lines and options for transportation and childcare. I think a lot of people forget that people have little kids that may not be in school, or if I have an appointment at 3 o'clock, what am I supposed to do if my kid gets out at 2:30? People with trauma are not always good problem solvers, especially if they're overwhelmed. And so, asking them to meet earlier or saying, you know, oh, do you need childcare? Maybe we can offer you some resources that would really help them. When people do the intake process, you know, they ask all those questions. We want to make sure we ask about all of their needs, not just the needs of the services that agency provides. That makes sense. Do you have something else going on? Because trauma does not. It's not work that way, right? It's usually not siloed like that. So the needs assessments, for example, need to be required. So we want to make sure that the client is able to voice all of their concerns. What else are they struggling with? This does not mean the agency has to provide all the needs or address all the needs. But if they're aware of it, they can provide a resource. And that's going a long way to establishing that safety. One example I have, and maybe this is just local, I work on a lot of college campuses. We don't want anyone to leave our office, right? And so it may embarrass some people if you ask, when was the last time you ate, or if you do some kind of food insecurity with them. But what I used to do is just have a basket of snacks, right? That way you don't have to ask, you don't have to, you know, we don't have to do that. Hey, if you're hungry, grab some. Right. So we often do that, and they're always free, and we just invest in that. If possible, organizations should have at least one female staff person working on each shift in case a woman prefers to meet with a woman or request that a woman remain in the room if only male providers are available. When I moved to the new place that I moved to, I was looking for a female dentist. I don't want to get into the dentist situation in a minute. I'm just that chair reclining, you're out, and anyway, it doesn't work. But it took forever to find a female dentist. And a lot of websites are not clear, like if it's a practice, can I choose the woman to meet with, or you just find whoever I'm going to get? And so it took a long And if you're already overwhelmed with trauma, you may not take that time and just not go to the dentist. Right, so if that's, if that can be made available, we'll make it safe for people calling in. And also the office space should be ADA accessible. Right, so if someone has a disability, they should be able to access the office. If the office has not already done so, they can do an ADA assessment. Hire a specialist, come in, take a look around, and not just do a physical assessment, because that's one part of it, but there's also mental health assessments they can do, right? So making comments about, it looks a little busy in here. Maybe you should move some of this other way. This looks overwhelming in this space, right? And then we should never, ever tolerate staff being verbally or physically abused under any circumstance. I don't care what a client or patient is going through, it is not okay for a staff to be mistreated, right? And so if a patient or client is behaving this way, they need a higher level of care. Coming into a clinic is not going to work for them. Maybe they need to be somewhere else. So do not sacrifice the staff emotional well-being to provide service to an individual who is too impaired for outpatient treatment. They need to be somewhere else if they're going to, if they can't even be cordial in a workspace. And I'm saying that as someone who has been cussed out on several occasions. Are you just calling and say, hello, so I was calling today to see, or they called you. It's like, oh, I didn't recognize the number on caller ID, and how are you doing? And they cut you off and they just start cussing and yelling about something they're angry about. Staff should not have to put up with that. And it should be clear what you should do if that happens. Okay, next one. So this is giving you some, or giving agency some clear ways to establish trust, right? We already talked about that a little bit, but these are some tangible things that can be done. So we watched the video about the women veterans who recovered from trauma. They've already had their trust violated by the military, by the VA, by family members, some of them, by friends, by strangers, and or healthcare professionals. So we want to provide that corrective experience I was talking about. We can make that our goal. So we want to slow down and help the person navigate the healthcare system, right? If you want an appointment with those individuals, you have to have a referral first. Well, what's a referral? What do I do? Who do I call? Tell them, as opposed to, oh, it should be in your member book. Whatever, you know, some people say that. Obviously, they don't know. I'll go to the website, it'll help you figure it out. Take the time to walk them through the system. If it was that easy, they would have done it before they started, right? So it's not intuitive. And I say this because you and the staff know the language that you use to get needs met. You know the inside lingo that's used. So teach that language to the clients. If you need to say you want this, right? So for example, I was working with a woman that needs, she got caught drinking and driving. And they said, well, you have to find some alcohol treatment. And I said, well, you have a mental illness, so you might need dual diagnosis. And it sounds like you don't want to be abstinent from drinking. So maybe you should ask about harm reduction if that's okay, right? And so she doesn't know those terms. She doesn't know what that means. So when you call to see which center will accept your insurance, ask if they offer these things, right? And that should helping her navigate a system that is overwhelming. And that is how we build trust, right? We can teach them the formal and informal of the healthcare system. No, if you come in at 4, even though we close at 4:30, most people are not going to work with you. So why don't you try to get here before 4 o'clock, right? So yes, it's posted that we stop work at 4:30. Most people have mentally checked out at 4, start shutting things down. You won't get anything done. Don't stress yourself out. Come in before then, right? Give them that little tip. Make sure that the check-in process is explained clearly over the phone so they know what to do when they arrive. When I arrive to someplace, I'm expecting to go to a front desk and say, hey, I'm here to see so-and-so. If that's not how it works, please explain what you're supposed to do, right? There's 2 desks, and you go here for that and this. Have things clearly labeled or explained to them. You're going to come in and check in with the security guard, then you're going to go to the front desk, and then you're going to give them, right? You tell them what to do when they get there, or they will get overwhelmed, right? If it's too many people and it's not clear what you're supposed to do, they might just leave you. If they are scheduling appointments like via email, you can kind of just attach all of that. And tell them what to expect for their first appointment, so no one gets blindsided by doing something or being asked to do something they were not prepared to do. So knowing what to expect before entering a new situation is very important to women who have experienced trauma. Tell me everyone that I will be coming into contact with, just so that. So for example, when I moved to the new place, I was going to Planned Parenthood to get some birth control, and I forgot, because I haven't lived there for several years, about the protesters. Right? You're coming in there for something else, because that particular place also offers abortions. The protesters are in Florida, we're in Illinois, so it's still legal there, but it's not in Missouri. And so they're trying to make sure that people that come in don't go. And so what they did, and of course I cried, I'm a crybaby, the people that work at Planned Parenthood came out and held up a sign that just said, these are, because they have on safety vests, these people do not work with Planned Parenthood, they are protesters. Do not give eye contact, just keep driving and go straight to the parking lot, right? So they tell you what to do when you arrive. That would have been nice to hear over the phone, because I was caught off guard by seeing two women approach me by car. I don't know who they are, so I rolled down my window because I see the safety vest, which looks professional to me. And they start talking. I'm not there, so I'm not in an emotional space to be triggered by that. But I probably would have had a problem if I was going there for that service and that happened. So I liked that they came out, they know what's happening, they're not gonna get into a shouting match with anyone, they just put up a sign that said keep drinking, right? And they're like, and when you leave, do the same thing, like do not engage with them, do not. And they were playing, stuff on the loudspeakers and all that. So because some language is triggering to women recovering from trauma, we want to follow all our verbal conversations up with an email to document the information that they might have dissociated during the conversation. Like that's pretty common for people with trauma. If you say something triggering, they dissociated to protect themselves. And so they might have missed the second half of what you said to do. Just send an email to follow up, right, with the information in there. There's no need for the person to have to come and tell you they need this information. Okay, next slide. And my favorite, the choices, right? So again, most people that have experienced trauma, the perpetrator has been male. So the most commonly reported traumas are childhood sexual abuse or sexual assault. While all genders may experience sex abuse and sexual assault, there is a higher percentage of men committing these crimes. Thus, there is sometimes a preference for a trauma survivor to only engage with female identified providers. So again, allowing the patient to determine how they will be contacted. Can they say if they want a specific gender to work with? Ask them if they want to be contacted by phone, text, email, or mail. That's a choice too. Instead of just calling all the time and leaving messages, what do they prefer? Be proactive about how your office implements trauma-informed care by asking patients directly about their experience. How do things go today? And if it's a big office, then you just slip them a paper, they can write it down. So you don't have to, everything is fine, right? So I'm not going to say anything in front of everyone here. I was working at a college campus, we're doing counseling, and at the room, in the waiting area, there's just windows. And so you go up and they say, who are you here to see and what do you want to meet with them about? So they say something like, oh, I want to drop a class, or I'm going to change a class. And so I say, oh, that'll take like 5 or 10 minutes. The person comes in and like, I was ready for this. Like, what? I didn't allow time for this. Like, why are all these students coming back here saying they want to do one thing and then dropping these? It's like, okay, so at the front window, can we please just have them write down while they're here to see us? Because this is causing a problem, right? We're getting backed up because we think that we're just going to sign some form. They need like a full session of our attention. And so we had to change that. No, they're not going to say why they're in front of them. And the waiting room was not a waiting room like at the door. It was the beginning of the hallway. So it's just anyone walking by financial aid and you go here to do this, you go there to get free coffee, whatever. Anyone can hear what you're saying. So no one is telling them why they're there to see us. And it was fun. I'm like, so when they come to this window, what are they telling you all? And then I looked around, I'm like, oh, no one's gonna say that, you know, and so anyway, so we figured out a way to do that. But that took some, I didn't ask for that, it was given. I just want to be clear. That took about 6 months. Okay, next time. Just for that simple request, that took 6 months of fighting. And then collaboration. So we want to gently, remember, teach patients how to work with staff to create solutions together. This gives them back some of their power that was snatched away by the person who violated them. This has to be taught. We weren't raised to collaborate with people that are in higher positions than us. So we'll have to teach people this. When making referrals, we want to present the patient with options in the community and discuss which they prefer, right? So if you're referring them to go do something, this is what you should do. These are the people in your neighborhood, who would you like to meet with? Right, and so you're also giving them choices, but that's also a way to collaborate. These are the things I'd like you to work on. Which ones do you want to start with, or who do you want to meet? And they may already have experience and know which places they want to go. Okay, next. Let's see. Empowerment. So sometimes our clients will discuss their trauma with anyone they're talking to, especially if they feel triggered. So we do have some people that, I'm sure you've met them. Maybe you're at a house party and someone just starts telling you their story. You're like, I just wanted some process, right? Like I didn't want this, but something about your energy, something about what you said, and you probably can say, did you have trauma, right? And they just feel like, I need to tell this person everything. And they probably never told anyone else, like the example you've given, right? And so if they feel triggered, some people overshare because that will help them feel safe. This means that the person just answers phones and makes schedules. They're going to hear some things that are really hard for them. So teach them active listening skills. Explain they're there to listen and validate, not to fix any issue. No one's asking you to do that. They don't have to solve anything, and they don't have to make an action plan for the person. Listening is sufficient. When someone is that triggered and that bottled up, just saying what they need to say is sufficient for them. And if the person on the other side can be taught to listen, that will help. So we can help patients by reframing their trauma responses, that's what we'll call them, as normal reactions to threatening encounters, right? So if you are not in a trauma situation, but something has triggered you to remember that you were traumatized, whatever you do is normal, right? Because the last time this happened. And so now moving forward, I'm going to always do this. We want to normalize that. And they can get help in learning better coping skills, but that's a normal response. Okay, so this was another time. Do we need a break? Because, okay, let's take up maybe a 5-minute break and I'll talk about the individual part and then we'll meet to see.
Sorry, I forgot to restart it.
That's okay. Even though the way the healthcare system is set up, we're often scheduled to see more people than we can handle. For example, I know that some doctors and psychiatrists, they have a 15-minute window. That is not enough time to cover everything that needs to be talked about. So emotional safety involves active listening without judgment or criticism, even with our difficult or challenging clients. We need to slow down, pay attention, and really listen. And we just apologize to the person that we're late for next. Right? We just apologize. Some people actually tell the front staff, I'm running behind today. Can you just let everyone know that I'm running behind? And so I received a call to say they're running X number of minutes behind. Do you want to reschedule or can you still come in? Right? So that is a very healthy way to handle this problem when the person is not going to be able to see everyone on their schedule. To do it that way. And we want to do this even when people are being not nice to us, right? So I don't mean to verbally abusive, not those people. We already talked about what to do with them, but the ones being difficult or challenging. Those with the most off-putting behavior may be the most in need of trauma-informed responses, right? So sometimes that that behavior they're doing is how they protect themselves from harm. And so hopefully we can help them out. The last thing we can do is, like the slide says, right? Ask your patient what she needs to feel safe, both emotionally and physically. People usually know. For example, I don't like having evening appointments here. It feels unsafe. Okay, so we'll make sure all your appointments are during the day. Right? Especially when the seasons change and it gets like dark at 4:30 or something. So you might have to have that conversation. Okay, next. And then this is the individual, these are the individual tips for trust. You want to be transparent, consistent, and predictable. If your sessions are, for example, 50 minutes, like so there are some therapists that have 50-minute sessions, then you need to wrap up in 50 minutes. If you may, it may seem helpful to allow a client to go over the 50-minute mark, but sometimes you will have back-to-back sessions, and then you can't do that, and the client will wonder, why are you making me in on time today, but I was allowed to talk with you during the rest weeks, right? So that's similar example I gave about if you're 15 minutes late, you have to reschedule. You have to keep those things in place. Boundaries are actually needed in trauma recovery. I know that sounds weird. You should be more flexible and open with them, and you can be flexible, but there also has to be boundaries. I've met several people that were raised without boundaries, like I think they call them laissez-faire parents in the past, right? That old term where you were allowed to just do what you want to do, no curfew, no rules, things like that. And they talk about how there were moments where they felt unsafe and uncared for, right? Because their friends had someone saying, no, you need to be home because I'm worried about your safety. So if my parent doesn't care that I do they not? Right, and so they were, as an adult, of course, so they're like, yeah, it's great. But as they got older, they were like, oh, I don't. That's why and then they're explaining the behaviors they do now because they didn't have those boundaries growing up, and they don't know how to create them for themselves. Like, I even talk about putting myself to bed. I am not ashamed to admit it. Like, you know what? I have to get off the phone. I have to put myself to bed, right? I have a night routine. I have to do it because if I don't have that, then the week just goes crazy. So you also want to clearly outline whatever your treatment program expectations are. Discuss being on time, what that means. So if you have a program, and if someone is late 3 times or kicked out, please say that more than just the forms at the beginning, right? If you give them a stack of forms and that is buried in there, no one's reading it, no one's listening. They're just going to scroll through and sign so they can get it over with. So you might have to remind them about that. Discuss any cancellation policies your office has, like, oh, you know, if you can't make it, please let us know 24 hours in advance or 48 hours in advance, whatever it is. And then you want to discuss how you expect them to participate in their own care. Like, you're not going to just show up here and sit comfortably in your chair. I'm expecting you to actively engage. I'll give you things to work on between our appointments. And please do not have the client just sign the informed consent. Discuss that content to make sure both of you are on the same page about moving forward. Most people are not moving. And I don't think it's laziness. I think we just have so much that we have to read. Like, do you agree to these terms and conditions? I will admit I never click on the box and read them. I just scroll to the bottom to click agree so I can move on with my life. Well, people are doing that for medical and mental health care and probably buying a home too. And that's dangerous, right? So you want to read everything, but you can understand how that gets out of hand. So let's just discuss the content with them. You want to emphasize the limits of confidentiality, for example, because if you have to reach it, you don't want the woman caught off guard, right? So I've had that happen before where, of course, you talk about the limits of confidentiality, but sometimes you have to review them. And I will stop someone when they're getting ready to tell her, well, I'll tell you what happened last time so that you remember the limits of, because I need you to know when you share something with me, I have to take action. Right, so now you can make an informed decision about what you want to share. If you continue to share and I have to take action, I'm going to assume you wanted that help, you wanted that intervention, right? And so that's one way to establish I know what I can expect from her. Like, I'm never going to get home and they get a call, right? She's going to do it right there in the office. And I know, like, I'll call CPS while they're sitting there. Like, yep, she just told me this and she's sitting right. Do you want to speak to her? Here you go. Right, and so I'm not doing anything behind your back. I'm not going to do it later and then act surprised when you tell me this happened. I'm going to do it upfront so that you know what to expect when you come in here. You may not like it, and usually they don't, obviously, but they know that's how I operate. Okay, next one. And then we're back at choice, but this time is for individual practices. So please avoid scheduling appointments for someone and instead provide them with options, right? Maybe 2 or 3. So you could look at your next 3 openings and offer them 3 different choices instead of emailing or mailing a postcard with appointment information without regarding their personal lives or potential barriers like transportation or childcare, right? It's important to ask language preferences. I think we make a lot of assumptions about what language people speak, and it is unreasonable to speak all languages that your clients speak, but knowing if they prefer to receive medical or mental health services in their native language is important, right? So for example, if I'm working with someone and they're bilingual, I will ask them, would you prefer therapy in your native language or do you want to use English? And I can give you a referral if it's your native language, because if you have your experiences in your native language, if that makes sense, then that's where your memories are stored. And so it's really harder to talk about it in the second language you learn. Does that make sense? Okay. And then we can use an interpreter or we can make a referral to someone. And always provide an alternative to whatever treatment you recommend. I want you to try this next week. Or you can also try it this way, right? You want to do that so that they know they always have a choice. And they can say no, right? So when I say, how do you feel about that? Do you really want to do this? No, I don't. Okay, that's fine. And we can talk about something else. But because I've incorporated that into the practice, they know they can say no, right? So at the end, the say no allowance is, do you want to try this? No, I don't. Okay, that's fine. Let's try something else, right? We can also explain their options and ask them which treatment they want to try first. That's another way to phrase it. So these are the things that I think will help you. Which one of these do you want to try first? Make sure they know explicitly that you will support whatever decision they make without saying this is my favorite, right? So let's not do that. Let's just give them their options and then support whatever they choose. And now we're back at collaboration. While I understand the intake process demands a lot of personal information up front, please consider their ability to trust you with personal trauma information. So even if you're asking questions about trauma, for example, most people will not answer, honestly, the first time they meet you. And I hope you understand, right? So have you ever been sexually abused? No. Like that's for someone I know. It's not for you, lady. I don't know you. I don't know if I'm ever going to come back and stuff. I don't know if you're going to tell someone. So I'm going to say no. So a lot of times it may take 3 months. It has taken one client a year to tell me why they were really in therapy. Like, why are we talking about her work day week after week? Like, she can't be just talking about this. It took her 12 months to say, well, what I really want to talk about is, like, what do I need to change about my approach so that people feel they can trust me sooner? I don't know. So I went through a lot of different things that I asked people up front, and then I let them know that they can talk about it later if they want, right? So if you say not right now, that means we can revisit it later. And that was a way for me to stop wasting someone's like a year of her life and money spent in therapy without talking about what she really wanted to talk about. So you can do that too. You can make it clear from the start of the intake session that they are allowed to refuse to answer specific questions, and that the choice to not answer will not lead to a discontinuation of services. Remember, in a lot of our public services, if you don't follow the rules, you're kicked out of a program, right? So these women are coming from these kind of programs, or if you don't obey and be compliant, you can't get the free service, or you can't get whatever the service is. Well, we untrain them by saying, if you say no, I will still work. If you say you don't trust me, I'm still going to be here. That's a different experience than we're used to. So do not force clients to retell narratives about their traumatic experiences. You don't need all those details, you really don't. If they trust you enough and want to share it, then you listen, you help them process the memories, but do not force specific details to be relived if it is not necessary, right? You're not filling out a police report, so I don't see why it would be necessary. People can heal from trauma, even if their memories are incomplete, which means we don't need all that information, right? So if you can heal without having your memories intact, that means to get help, you don't need to do a play-by-play for the person. So having said that, some women find it helpful to tell their story multiple times, right? So some people, that's actually cathartic for them. The more times they tell it, the less power it has. That's what they've told. Okay, I enjoy talking about it. Not enjoy, I should be so, I'm so sorry. They don't mind talking about it because each time they tell it, it's less of an emotional impact, is what they've said, right? So that's some women. Most people find it re-traumatizing, and you can see when they're talking to you, they go someplace else. Like they're almost back at that age, and you have to ground them to get them out of the office, right? So we've all been trained, to provide care using similar interventions, but no intervention requires the specific details of an assault or sex abuse. So spend more time with these kind of clients, trying to understand their background, so that when you make recommendations or referrals, you have made cultural considerations. That's collaboration, right? You already know what they need, right? It is traumatizing to be referred to a service in a neighborhood known to be unfriendly to a specific cultural. I don't know if this area is like this, but I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and it was very segregated. It was very clear where everyone belonged, if you know what I mean. And so when we were making referrals, we're going to look for the space that is safe for the person that we're working with. We're not going to send someone of a different cultural group into a predominantly not cultural group of theirs, and so they feel uncomfortable there. Like that's not, you're not collaborating, you're not using their strengths in that, right? So you have to be aware of this in your community. You have to know the unsafe places. So as a Black woman, for example, when I moved, I moved a lot. And so whenever I move, I have to ask another Black person, where the safe space is, where should I drive? Right, even in 2023, I still need to ask, where are we welcome, where are we not? Because it's very important that I don't make that error, right? Because it could be dangerous for me. And so other people do that as well in different groups, right? They need to know where it's safe to go around. You will have to learn that someday. I don't. I know it. Whenever I spoke about safety, when I moved to a new place, okay, gay people feel safe here, trans people feel safe here, Black people feel safe here. Like I know where interracial couples feel safe in this space and not that space, because I have to do it for safety reasons. I don't know how to do that if that's not part of your experience. Right? So who do you ask? Who do you feel safe enough to ask a question? You can ask the client, what neighborhoods are safe for you? What places do you avoid? Okay. They'll tell you, oh, I don't go to such and such. You're like, really? Why not? But do you need to know? Right? Like, do you need that information? So don't make them justify. If they tell you what's safe and unsafe, don't make them justify to you, oh, when I go there, I never had that problem. Right? So don't do that, right? So they tell you a place is unsafe, please believe them and just move on to another neighborhood. Don't ask them to recount whatever experience made them avoid that space, or just, like I said, justify why they don't feel safe there. Okay, next. Then we have empowerment, right? So empowerment is about, it's a strength-based approach. So we're really trying to help the person rely on that resilience that got them out of the trauma. We try to reframe symptoms as adaptation. We try to highlight their resilience instead of pathologizing. Because sometimes, and I look at this weird, they're like, yeah, some of these PTSD symptoms can be strength. Like, is it that bad to be hypervigilant? Like, aren't you going to be super safe? Right? So I went through this process where I'm thinking, how do we reframe what we've told someone requires medication? right? So, because I think the strength-based approach helps someone, you know what? I am careful when I go out by myself. I do look around and I am aware of my surroundings. Yes, the DSM calls it hypervigilance, and it's probably not necessary everywhere you go, but it's kept you safe. It's kept you safe, right? So if we point out someone's strengths and they thought those were weaknesses, that can be empowering to them. So we want to show respect to clients. So for those of you that work in the field, like if you have diagnosed them with something, please explain how your observations and your comments helped you determine that they meet the criteria. And then leave room for them to ask questions about it. You will not believe how many people don't know their diagnosis. It's like, oh, it looks like you have such and such. Who told you that? And like, do I tell them what's in their chart? Like, can I give this? Well, it's their chart, and I learned in some places, I won't name names, that's not okay. But I think if you write something about someone in their medical chart that they can then order copies of, you should be able to tell them. And so I would tell them, so-and-so met with you on this day and thought you had this, and these are the criteria they thought you met, right? What do you think of the meeting or the session with the two of you? And so we have a conversation. I remember I knew this was a problem in our field, but I was meeting with a student and he came in, and again, one of those students that he wanted to drop a class, but he was really dropping something else that happened. But he had gone to his social security year. You know how hard those are to get. And that was the first time he heard his diagnosis. Like, are you in a courtroom full of strangers and, you know, people take it, I don't know what it's like, I've never been to one of those hearings. That does not sound like the place where you want to learn you have schizoaffective disorder. That is not the place to hear that. He didn't know what it was. He didn't understand anything. And so he just left this courtroom just devastated and crying, and he was upset. And so I explained to him what it was. I told him the criteria. He was like, do you think I have? I was like, I just met you. Like, I don't know what you told someone. I said, but what I will say is when someone diagnoses you, they're either using their observations or something you've reported to them, right? And so he was upset and he didn't want to see that doctor anymore. And I didn't know how to help, right? So I called the local because he really needed the Social Security benefits. I'm like, please don't mess this up, right? Like you really need this benefit, but you don't have to be demoralized to get it, right? And so trying to figure out who can advocate for him. And it turns out there was a local group that could go with him and argue on his behalf. It's just very disempowering for clients to find out from someone else that you diagnosed them with something or you said something, right? So when we were being trained to write our notes, for example, we were told, since a client can order these at any time, order a copy, always write as if they're reading over your shoulder. I think a lot of people didn't get that training, right? Because I read some things, I'm like, that is subjective. So if you're writing as if the client is reading it, you're more objective and you're going to support whatever you state with facts or data as evidenced by this, right? That kind of thing. That helps people feel safe. Someone else should be able to look at that same note and come to a different conclusion on their own, right? But at least you provided your rationale for why you decided to do this. All right, next slide. Okay, you're halfway there, I promise. We're almost done. So this is the end of the training. So it means that you have, I'm assuming, right, that you have made the decision to commit to providing trauma care, right, either now or in the future. And I'm hoping that you recognize that you already do some of these things. I'm hoping some of this wasn't sort of like, oh yeah, that makes sense, I do that. I'm glad I do that, right? When there is an incident with the patient or a client, please set aside sufficient time to debrief with the team or the staff. Like that's important. At the VA, we had lots of veterans act out for different reasons, psychotic, psychosis, or maybe they were just upset that day. But when the tornado was, right, once we get them help, or we get them hospitalized, or we, have them removed, there needs to be time for the team to sit with those feelings. And if someone needs to process it, they have that space. That's very important. We have to take care of our staff members who experience vicarious trauma, right? So we're choosing this work. everyone didn't choose this. So some of the people we work with didn't choose to do this. They were choosing to do something else that's more of a support role. So we want to make sure we work with them. I remember doing a research study, and we're working with trans women in San Francisco, and we're talking about sexuality and disability. And I thought it was a great session. We had like 3 hours, and it was 14 trans women there, and I'm all excited. And after they left, I had some students acting as research assistants. They're like, "Oh my God, that was so much." I was like, "Let's go out to eat." And their response was like, "I can't even stand up." And I thought, oh no, so I'm used to hearing this information and they're not. And so we didn't get to go out to eat because I need to take care of their feelings, because I was newer. I was newer to the field, and I didn't remember that people outside of our field are not used to that language. Whereas we hear it or we've experienced it, so it's not new for us. And so people that are coming to this are like, what? That happened to a person? Like, yeah, it's happening to a lot of people. So I was able to give them that space. But yeah, I was ready to go for ice cream. And they let me know that, no, that's not, we need a debriefing here. They don't use those words, but that's what we needed. Finally, be proactive and provide in-service training or come to a training, right? To avoid re-traumatizing patients. We also want to make sure there's trainings on anti-racism, anti-homophobia, women with disabilities, just all the different pockets of oppression and marginalization. We want to make sure that we're not doing any of that moving forward.